My dear students, a very good morning to all of you. Today my colleague and I are going to talk about how to write job applications and resume. Before we start, you must be having a small doubt or a question in your mind that in this time of speedy communication devices like internet, Facebook, and the electronic gadgets which have made communication so fast, so easy, so effective, what is the need at all to write, attempt applications? Because it is generally assumed that writing is the most difficult part or the skill among the four skills, that is listening, speaking, reading and writing. Because when we write something, we have to take care of so many things. For example, syntax, sentence pattern, grammar, appropriate vocabulary, and the most important thing, whether our message is being conveyed or not. And it has been found that many youngsters, in fact many people, almost 70-80% of people nowadays, they resort to SMS communication, Facebook communication, email communication, and there are less and less letter writing, or you can say formal writing in general. But friends, there are some advantages of writing letters, formal communication. And before I specifically speak about how to write application letters, let me briefly discuss the advantages of written communication. Written communication is generally seen as the most effective and oldest forms of communication. It is the oldest means of secondary communication, because the primary or the first means of communication is speech. It is through written records that business transactions have taken place throughout the world. And we all know the importance of the manuscripts which the writers in the old ages or in the dark ages they wrote. And some of the institutions across the world, they have preserved those manuscripts because it is a monument to be kept and taken care of. The second importance of written communication, and to my mind the most important, is that it forms a permanent record of a transaction. While communication done through SMS, email or Facebook may be lost or may not stand in a court of law, when something is written, on the other hand, when it is a formal communication on a letter with a signature on it and other details, in case it is a letterhead, then it constitutes a permanent record. It forms a permanent record. It can be stored for a longer period of time, and whenever the need arises, it can be referred back to also. Now, written communication or letter writing, generally speaking, serves four different functions. These are very important functions. Friends, you must be knowing that the purpose of any communication is to persuade, is to convince people. If we ponder over our need to communicate, then we must think, why do we need to communicate? Whether it is speech or whether it is through writing. We communicate because we want to convince other people about our ideas, thoughts and feelings. The same thing is also applied to formal letter writing. So the first function, the first purpose, the first objective of written communication is to persuade the reader about your skills, about your abilities. And I think it can be best conveyed, it can be best communicated, effectively communicated through the modes of writing letters, because there you have the space, there you can think before you write, and most importantly, you can also revise your thoughts, which is not a case in speech. Once you have spoken words, they are forever. But before you dispatch a letter, before you send it through post or courier it, you have time to read it, to revise it, to modify it, and to edit it. So I think written communication serves the first important purpose, that of convincing the readers. The second purpose that it serves is legal function and reference function. We will talk about these two functions jointly. As I said in the previous slide, written communication can be stored, can be preserved for future reference, and it can be also presented as an evidence, as a proof of communication in a court of law, and it can stand there as a proof also. So we can use it for legal as well as for referencing function. And the last function of written communication is your goodwill function. You must be receiving a number of letters, if not letters, then at least emails, either from FMCG company or from an insurance company or from a bank, selling or informing about their products, say for example insurance or personal loan or auto loan, or about the launch of a new TV, a new gadget, a new washing machine, or it can be anything. And if you have closely looked at these letters, then you must have noticed that they take advantage of a simple letter to project the brand of their company, to talk about the salient features, the important features of their project, the discounts they are offering you, and most importantly, they are trying to convince you that this is the best product you can purchase from a market. So writing letters can also be used to create goodwill among the readers as well as among the customers. Now we will look at specifically towards job applications. The objectives of job application letters is not to get a job, because getting a job is a later stage, it will come at a later stage. But first you have to ensure that you are called for an interview. So to become eligible to appear in an interview, you will need to write an application letter along with your resume. So in your application letters, you will need to concentrate on three important things. You will need to talk about your knowledge, about your experience, and most importantly about your skills. So any application letter will constitute these three components, talking about your knowledge, about your skills, the areas you are expert in, and the experience you have for a similar job in another company, institution or organization. Now even if you don't have the relevant experience, but if you have the knowledge, the skills and the qualifications, then these things also suffice to make you eligible for an interview. So don't worry if you don't have an experience, because if you are a recent pass out from a university, then naturally you are looking for a job and you don't have an experience. But make sure that you have the skills, the aptitude, and also make sure that you are able to write about these two things, knowledge and skills, in your application. The objectives, specific objectives. Now we will talk about specific objectives of your application letter. The first thing should be that you should show your interest and enthusiasm in the position that you are applying for. The reader, the prospective employer, we will better say, not reader but prospective employer, would like to hire such an employee who is interested in the brand, in the institution, in the organization that he stands for. So, in the very first paragraph, you must make sure that you talk about the institution and your goal to get hired in this organization. Friends, you should also remember that when you are applying for a job in an institution, in a company, it is also very necessary that you should have some previous knowledge, some information in bits and pieces about the company. You should not make your prospective employer feel that you are writing or you are applying for the job out of blue. You must have the knowledge about the products, about the values, about the types of customers they are serving before you apply, and also before you appear in an interview if you are called for. This is very, very important part of your application process. In the next paragraph, try to summarize briefly the highlights of your resume. Try to talk about your experience. If you have passed your degrees, say from IIT or IIM or NIT or a very prestigious national level institution, then mention this institute particularly in your application letter, but don't discuss your qualifications in detail, because you are going to speak about your qualifications, experience, skills, projects that you have carried out in detail in your resume that you are going to attach. So try to summarize the important features of your resume in this second paragraph. Now, in the third paragraph, you should demonstrate your aptitude. Aptitude in the sense that you should make your prospective employer, you should make your reader feel that you have the aptitude, you have the confidence, you have the mindset for the job that you are applying for. That is very important. Supposing that you are applying for a job that requires you to stay till late in the evening, then you should mention this thing in your application letter. Likewise, if you are not comfortable for staying late in the evening also, then you should also make it clear in your application that you will be able to work hard during the day hours and not during the late evening hours or during the night hours if it runs during the night shift also. So here you have the opportunity to make your stand clear. Next paragraph will constitute about the position you are applying for and how you found out about the organization and or position. Some of the writers, some of the interviewers, they also prefer to talk about this in the very first paragraph, and this depends upon your choice of the way of writing. It is also preferable to inform your prospective employer about how you found out about the position and the vacancy. In case you have read it through a newspaper, in case you have come to know about a vacancy either through a website publication or through a newspaper, then you should make it clear in the very first sentence of your application that I have come to know about a vacancy in your organization through an advertisement published in so and so newspaper on so and so date. So this will make the employer clear about the source of information. In case you have come to know through a reliable source, then it is not preferable to mention his or her name, but you can simply write that I have come to know through reliable sources that there is a vacancy in your organization and I am interested to offer my candidature for the same post. In the next slide, we will talk about the opening paragraphs of your application. Previously, in the previous slides, we have seen two paragraphs. Now the third paragraph will relate to arousing your interest, creating the interest in the reader's mind about your qualifications. When you have written about your qualifications, when you have written about your skills, these things should arouse interest in the mind of the prospective employer. He or she should be interested in knowing more about you by referring to the resume. So make sure that your application letter serves this function. If your application letter does not meet this criteria, then you should think and revise your application letter. Okay. The middle paragraphs will talk about your detailed qualifications, and you should try to see that your qualifications and your skills, they meet the criteria set for a particular position that you are applying for. It is not that the company has asked for qualifications which you do not have and yet you are applying for that position. This